All right, good evening, everybody. It is 8 p.m., Monday, May 9th, 2021. Welcome to the South Orange Maplewood Board of Education Staff Renewal, an organizational meeting. This meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded for storage and viewing on our district website. The public can participate during hearings of individuals and delegates by signing up for a sheet at the front entrance or signing up for audio public speaks via WebEx through a form available on our website. Adequate written notice of this meeting of the South Orange Maplewood Board of Education has been sent to both townships and village clerks, the Star Ledger, the News Record, tapatasoma.net, and the Village Green. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Burnside, please note for the record that Board Member Telsford gave us advance notice he will be unable to attend this evening. And with that, please call the roll.
Board Member Susan Bergen.
Here.
Board President Thayer Joshua.
Here.
Board Member Alyssa Malaspina.
Here.
Student Representative Noah Moros.
Here.
Board Member Aaron Siders.
Here.
Board Member Arun Vadlabani.
Here.
Board Member Caitlin Whitletter.
Here.
Board Member Courtney Wingfield.
Here.
Board Member Johanna Wright.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to hold this meeting in a hybrid format. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Siders. All in favor? All right, that appears to be unanimous, Mr. Burnside. The school board meeting is a business meeting in public and not a meeting with the public. Oftentimes, it may appear to members of our audience that the Board of Education takes action with very little comment, and in many cases, a unanimous vote. Before a matter is placed on the agenda at a public meeting, the administration has thoroughly reviewed the matter with the superintendent. If the superintendent is satisfied that the matter is ready to be presented to the board, it is referred to the appropriate board committee. Members of the board committee work with the administration to ensure members fully understand the matter. After the committee discusses the matter, it is then shared with other board members for consideration, and only then is it placed on the agenda for board discussion and action at a public meeting. We are now at the time for our first hearings of individuals and delegates, known as public speaks. This is an opportunity for you to share your concerns about an item on the agenda, but it's not a time for dialogue with the board. The board requests that you state your name and town of residence for your record. Mr. Burnside, if you can provide the sheet. We will set the time to 3 minutes for each speaker, and we ask that you respect that time limit. We must cut you off so it does not appear as if we're giving anyone an advantage to share their views over another individual. Speakers have the full protection of free speech during public speaks. However, this forum does not protect you from the subject of your free speech pursuing libel or slander charges. And finally, the board recommends that all members of our community pursue the chain of command. We will now start with our in-person public speaks. And our first public speaks is from Alice Solomon. All right, wait. We're going to start the clock in a minute, but just turn the mic on.
I can't hear you.
Okay, we can hear you now. We just want to make sure you turn the mic on first.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. This letter I'm reading to you is from the Soma Aviva chapter of Hadassah, an international Jewish women's organization, and we represent over 300 local members. More than 6 months have gone by without a word from anyone concerned with our school district about the status of our highly respected teacher, Tamar Herman. It is now absolutely clear that the hijab yanking incident never occurred. This is substantiated by the Essex County prosecutor, as well as the mother's personal apology to Ms. Herman, explaining that her daughter sometimes made up things and it was all a misunderstanding. Yet our school district continues to be silent and allows this fabrication to continue. It is also clear that Ms. Herman's removal from her classroom was based on vicious anti-Semitic allegations and hateful social media postings. Ms. Herman's own statements about the incident were ignored, and her unblemished professional record was not even considered. The decision to move Ms. Herman was prompted by misinformation and obvious anti-Semitic falsehoods, and have caused unspeakable harm to this Jewish teacher who was so unjustly denigrated by the national media as well as our own sources. As a result of these actions, with no attempt to ameliorate the death threats, false accusations, and despicable social media postings, the district has destroyed the life of this dedicated, effective, and passionate teacher. With no word from our school district, Ms. Herman continues to be kept in limbo. There is not now and never was anything, not attorney's advice and not an ongoing investigation, that prevents you from asking our community to hold off judgment and stating that we're not sure what happened that day and that the anti-Semitic undertones are totally inappropriate. It is well past time to take responsibility to exonerate Ms. Herman, to attempt to restore her reputation and dignity, and to acknowledge the great harm you have caused. It is also time to acknowledge the anti-Semitism that has been unleashed by your silence and examine its broader consequences. Although information about Islamophobia was supplied to our school community at the time of the incident, no attempt was made to deal with the anti-Semitic undercurrent.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you, Ms. Alma. Your time is up. Thank you. Our next in-person public speaks is from Stephanie Barham. Wait, turn the mic on. There's a button right underneath. Oh, he's got
hello.
it. Perfect.
Got
Thank
it.
you. Good evening.
Good evening, board members. My name's Stephanie Barham. I have lived in Maplewood for 43 years, and both of my children went through the entire Maplewood public school system, from kindergarten through graduation at Columbia High School. And we have the deepest respect for the public schools of South Orange, Maplewood. I'm going to continue to speak about Tamar Herman. Although information about Islamophobia was supplied to our school community at the time of the incident, no attempt was made to deal with the anti-Semitic undercurrent. There was no Islamophobia involved, but there was and still is anti-Semitism connected with the incident. Wake up and realize the great harm done by your silence. Understand that your inaction allows the anti-Semitism to fester and grow, but you can stop it now if you choose to. We therefore respectfully request that you promptly address the anti-Semitism with your staff and school community. We implore you to begin the process of healing and to restore confidence in our school district's ability to act appropriately for the well-being of our entire community. Sincerely, Alice Sullivan, Carol Dranov, South Orange Maplewood, Aviva Hadassah co-presidents, and all of the Hadassah membership. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We will now switch to audio public speaks. And our first audio public speaks is from Natalie Peretti.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Yes, you
wonderful.
can. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, 1 second. Oh, shoot. Apologies, I just lost what I was looking for on my computer. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So yes, I'm Natalie Peretti. I'm a South Orange resident, and I have two kids who are students in the district. They attend South Mountain Elementary and South Orange Middle School. My comments tonight are about South Mountain Elementary, the current lack of adequate COVID protections there, and what you as district leaders can choose to do in response. Parents received COVID notification letters from Principal Mason 4 out of 5 days last week. Most of the notifications referred to multiple individuals who had tested positive. Families of at least one class in the school have been informed officially of a classroom outbreak. This is just the information that has been shared officially. We know that unofficially case numbers are actually a lot higher. South Mountain may be trending in the same direction as Clinton and Marshall. A couple things are very likely to have contributed to the increasing cases at the school: the district's current mask optional policy and indoor lunch. The school has been mask optional based on updated district plans from March 14th. After a couple weeks of the indoor mask option guidance going into effect, I think there have been only been a couple of students choosing to still mask in my second graders class. His class is not unusual in this regard. Contrary to what many would like to believe, mask optional essentially does mean mask less. COVID protections during the lunch period have essentially ended at the school as well. The district used to require social distancing during lunch at elementary schools and lunch outdoors when possible, but currently it no longer does. As a result, sometime around spring break, even though it was never communicated to families, the lunch protocols at South Mountain Elementary changed. The school stopped dividing students in between two lunch locations on indoor lunch days, the cafeteria and the auditorium, to allow for better social distancing. Also, there are no plans to resume outdoor lunch at the school. So every day, lunch is taking place only indoors, where an entire grade is together in the cafeteria. Like other cafeterias in the district, the cafeteria has windows that are partially open when weather permits, and Odorox machines instead of HEPA air cleaners. South Mountain Elementary needs to shift back to better COVID protections right away. Please do not delay in giving clear guidance for a temporary shift back to universal masking and improved lunch safety to control the number of students and staff who become infected and in turn transmit COVID to family members, some of whom may be medically vulnerable. Many people with COVID will be fortunate to have a mild case, but we know that it's not mild for everyone, and we know that repeat infections can bring about long-term health impacts. Once this current surge has passed, guidance requiring COVID lunch safety protections at all schools needs to be kept in place. It's not appropriate to revert back to the pre-pandemic normal of crowded, underventilated cafeterias. Also, guidance requiring masking indoors at schools should stay in place until community transmission is low again and schools are able to show that all instructional spaces and
Thank you,
lunch
Ms. Purdy. Your
spaces
time is up.
meet federal and state indoor air quality standards.
Thank you, Ms. Purdy. Your time is up. Our next audio public speaks is from Kathleen Mitchell.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Kathleen Mitchell. I'm a Maplewood resident with 2 children at Clinton School. I am here tonight because ultimately you are all responsible for the safety of students and teachers, and I want to make it very clear that the district's COVID-19 mitigation measures are not keeping children and teachers safe. These measures are not stopping children and teachers from contracting and spreading COVID in our schools, nor are they preventing large-scale outbreaks. At Clinton School, approximately 100 children were absent before any action was taken and a temporary mask mandate reinstated. In my own child's classroom, COVID had spread to 7 children before parents were told about the outbreak and advised to test and mask our children. Your methods are not working. School and district leaders have continued to insist that their hands are tied, and yet there is absolutely nothing prohibiting this district from mandating masks in individual classrooms or specific schools before the situation becomes as bad as it has at Clinton. There is no need to wait for the health department. New Jersey has given this authority to school districts. Similarly, there is nothing preventing the school district from being transparent with families about the scope of COVID in our schools. Emails that simply say individuals have tested positive instead of including a number that principals are in possession of, is not transparency. A dashboard updated only once a week that only includes PCR test results, likely missing 2/3 of cases, is not helpful. There is absolutely no reason that this district can't make a choice to inform families of the total number of COVID cases, including rapid home test results. School personnel have these numbers. They simply refuse to share them. So I want to be very clear. You are making these choices. You are making the choice to not implement protections that are well within your authority, and you are making the choice to not be transparent. And the result is that every day, children and teachers are becoming ill and spreading COVID to their families who remain absolutely powerless. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next audio public speaks is from Heather Sazlowski.
I've noted that in the room that you're sitting in, there are 5 HEPA filters. I've noted that you have a virtual option, and a number of you have exercised that option tonight and on other nights. Yet, you want my son and 160 of his 6th grade peers, who are all in chorus, there's 161 is my understanding, from his grade alone. You want them to join with the 7th grade chorus and the 8th grade chorus and the select chorus and all of the parents who would like to see them perform, and you have not even asked anyone to mask. It's not that you haven't asked for a mask mandate, which you should for that particular type of event. Your own policies say so. The Department of Health has explicitly said you should do so. We have that all on video from last week. You didn't even mention masks. And when I asked the director of that program, the answer was, we are a mask optional school. Well, so was Clinton, and so was South Mountain. We have known for over 2 years that singing is a high-risk event. It has caused COVID outbreaks from the very beginning. We've all seen those stories. We know what's happened with the theater productions that have occurred in this district. We know that you can do better because you've subsequently put into place some of that. Why not at an event where 400 youth will be singing and countless other people will be present? You're not even asking the people coming in from the outside to mask. There's this constant illogical situation where you're just so allergic to transparency that you won't do anything unless people come and rant and rave. We shouldn't have to fight for everything. This is just simple logic. It's simple safety. Stop pointing the finger at every other place. It doesn't make sense. My son has already brought COVID home from school once. He has no choice but to attend lunch when he goes to school. We simply are not privileged enough to pick him up every day, as some have suggested. And he has no choice but to visit the nurse every day. You're taking the most high-risk students and families and putting them at risk again because you refuse to even think outside the box at all. Everything is completely black and white. We're either totally virtual or nothing counts at all. And that makes no sense. All of the guidance talks about mitigation. We know the ventilation's not so good. We know there's no distancing. Why can't you mitigate with masks, especially for huge events like this? It's appalling that I even have to come and ask.
Thank you. Our next audio public speaks is from Lena Stapleton.
Hi. Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Speak, we can, but can you speak a little louder?
Okay, I'm just
Or
gonna
get a
make
little closer to the mic?
Okay, sorry. Is better?
Yes, you have 3 minutes.
I wanted to be there in person, but I'm home caring for my sick children. My toddler and my kindergartner both have COVID. My kindergartner does not participate in any indoor activities other than school. And a person in her classroom who was present last Monday tested positive on Tuesday. My kindergartner tested positive on Thursday evening, and my toddler tested positive on Sunday. My toddler is exactly COVID years old. She was born March 20th, 2020. We have spent her entire life in this pandemic, being as cautious and protective as was in our power. My COVID mantra has been, don't share air. It is not within my power to place 5 HEPA filtration devices in my child's classroom, as you have in the room you sit in this very moment. It is not within my power to open the bus and classroom windows and doors. It is not within my power to require masks in the classroom. And so my family is at the mercy of the decisions made by the officials we have elected. It is within your power, and it is your duty to keep our kids safe. I'm sick of each one of you saying you don't have the power, remaining silent, dodging the truth, and simply making bad choices for our children. So while I could have been there in person without my mask, according to your rules, potentially exposing all of you, the ones who showed up, I chose to speak from home instead. Don't share air, share information. Don't take away protections, take responsibility. Answer our questions with words, or better yet, actions. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes our public speaks. Dr. Taylor, care to respond?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for those who came out to share your evening with us. For those who don't normally attend these meetings, both our team and I, we take copious notes, and I would normally give a response right now to the best of my ability, but this is a special meeting with a singular focus. So I will keep my responses very brief, just to reiterate that for all personnel matters, we are not permitted to respond or speak in public about any of our employees, including myself. That there's a confidential right that those employees have. However, you as the public can, of course, come out and share your thoughts and advocate as you have, as our board president spoke about in his opening. Regarding difference of opinions on testing and home tests versus PCRs, our dashboard and all those ongoing conversations around COVID. I will give a statement around that, but I'm not going to do it right now at this meeting because the purpose of this meeting is to reappoint our employees. Those are all my comments.
Thanks, Dr. Taylor. I'll now make a motion to, I guess, go to discussion for resolutions 4295 and 4296. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Siders. All in favor? All right, that appears to be unanimous, Mr. Burnside. We're now at discussion for resolutions 4295 and 4296. Any questions, comments? All right, seeing none, close discussion for resolutions 4295 and 4296. I will call them individually. I'll start. Mr. Burnside, can you please call the roll on resolution 4295?
Board Member Bergen?
Yes.
Board President Joshua?
Yes.
Board Member Malaspina?
No.
Board Member Siders?
Yes.
Board Member Vadlamani?
Yes.
Board Member Wingfield?
Yes.
Board Member Whitletter?
Yes.
Board Member Wright? Was that yes? Motion passes.
Thank you. I'll now call the resolution. Mr. Burnside, please call the roll for resolution 4296, this time reverse order.
Board Member Wright?
No.
Board Member Whitletter?
Yes.
Board Member Wingfield?
Yes.
Board Member Vadlamani,
Yes.
Board Member Siders,
Yes.
Board Member Malaspina,
No.
Board President Joshua,
Yes.
Board Member Bergen.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay. We are now at, I don't see it here, but I'll do the second public speaks before we go into business. We're now at the time for our second public speaks, also known as hearings, individuals and delegates. This is an opportunity for you to share concerns about an item on the agenda, but not time for dialogue with the board. Board requests that you state the name and town of your residence for the record. We'll set the time limit to 3 minutes for each speaker and ask that you respect that time limit. We must cut you off so it does not appear as if we are giving anyone an advantage to share their views over another individual. Speakers have the full protection of free speech during public speaks. However, this forum does not protect you from the subject of your free speech, pursuing libel or slander charges. And finally, the board recommends all members of our community pursue the chain of command. Mr. Burnside, any additional in-person public speaks?
None.
Thank you. And Mr. Bonds, I don't see any additions to the spreadsheet as well. All right, so that concludes our second public speaks.
I did see a hand raised before in the attendance area.
Yep. All right, well, our public speaks are through the WebEx on the website or or in person. We do provide that spreadsheet in advance for all of our meetings. And we are meeting again next Monday, which I will notice at the end of this meeting tonight, where folks can come in and offer their public speaks. Thank you. Okay, we are now at the time for new business. I do have 2 items for new business this evening, and then I'll open up and see if anyone has comments. So I'll go to the first one. If folks give me 10 seconds, I just want to pull up my notes. And this goes to a little bit of what we just heard. Dr. Taylor did want to provide you the opportunity to offer some comments based on the conversation that you and I participated in last week with members of both township, municipal officers, departments of health, and members of your administration. I apologize for everybody. Just give me a second to pull these notes up. Where'd it go? Oops. I have lost my notes. And I do want to get to this first. Just give me 1 second. I apologize. Here we go. Good old search function, never fails. So Dr. I just want to reiterate some of the things that I heard, and I just want to make sure that my recollection is correct. And it goes to, again, some of the things we just discussed. Number 1, my understanding is that both types of lab tests, both rapid and PCR, are counted on our dashboard. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And that home tests are not reported on the district dashboard. They are accepted as an initiation of virtual learning from parents
That
and
is
guardians.
correct. That is correct.
Okay, so I just want to reiterate that home tests are not reported on the district's dashboard, and that is statewide guidance, and we've confirmed that with our health departments, that home tests are not reported anywhere. They're not reported in either town's numbers, county's numbers, or its state metrics, right? Also, my understanding, and I think this has been pushed out by the district, is that contact tracing is not occurring because there's not enough capacity in-house to do so during a mass optional environment. I also believe that some of the definitions have changed. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. The definition of a close contact starts with being well masked. And so if we're not well masked, to start contact tracing with the available school nurses is just not possible.
Okay. And then 3 other notes. my understanding is that the health departments have specifically stated that the district should not wait for their recommendations to implement additional mitigation strategies, and the district should do what they believe is in the best interest for the district overall and for each individual school community. Accurate?
That is accurate.
Okay, and then, so, and there's, I guess, this is another question. I presume that also means that removal of additional mitigation strategies also can be done as the school, and the school community or district feels best.
That is correct.
All right, and then two others I think that are important for everyone here. Outbreak is defined as 3 lab-confirmed cases in a classroom.
That's
And then,
correct.
per local health recommendation, 3 classrooms in the school that are experiencing an outbreak mandate school-wide masking for 5 days.
That's correct.
All right, is there anything else from that meeting that you wish to share?
So we shared the information from that meeting with our Health and Wellness Subcommittee, and we're preparing an update for everyone that'll be a part of next week's board meeting. But the specifics that you just commented on, I can confirm from my attendance there.
Thank you. Anybody questions on this? Board member Whitletter.
Is there a defined communication process when an outbreak occurs? And is that a directive from the district, or are the individual schools operating independently as it relates to the communication process?
We have a well-established communication process. We have form letters made out for every scenario that our principals engage with, and every time that there is a confirmed positive case, the principal, myself, and the lead nurse are all kept abreast of that. And the folks who are on our subcommittee, including Ms. Badine, the Assistant Super of Special Services, we're all involved with that communication. They've done a yeoman's job of getting that information turned around as quickly as possible, normally within just a few hours.
Board member Malaspina.
Yeah, I need to say that I do have some concerns about this entire process. I think that it has been very confusing to many. Our communication has not been what it should be. And, you know, we do get daily updates on the numbers, so I don't understand why we cannot be sending out something saying that we're seeing an uptick, can you please mask, stuff like that. We are tracking the daily numbers, and you can easily tell when there is an uptick. There is nothing to stop us from doing that. And I mean, it is, I can't even fathom the fact that now the PTAs are having to pick up for the district and try to make these forms that are trying to communicate information about outbreaks in the classroom. That shouldn't be the PTA's job. That shouldn't be parents' job. This is our job. And you know, since we went to mask optional, it's like it just is like, well, sorry, you guys are on your own. And I have great concerns about that. And I do feel like I shouldn't also have to be reading about an outbreak in the Village Green and not have any knowledge about it until I read about it in the Village Green and a parent told me.
So I would offer in response to that you made some statements around PTAs having to do something or must do something. PTAs are a separate entity to the school district. They're great, they're our partners, but we don't have control over their actions and what they deem as a priority. If PTAs want to collect home tests, that is their right to do so. We are held to a higher standard based on state guidance. And as our board president just noted from the meeting that we had, that has continued to be that home tests are not a part of our official reporting, nor do they trigger class-wide or school-wide actions, and for good reason. I can give you a few examples, but one would be we've had folks reach out to us to share that after a few hours, their home tests had changed colors. And that is not how home tests should be administered, especially when you're talking about decisions that affect thousands and thousands of people thousands and thousands of families. Additionally, as we shared in the March 14th communication, when mask optional is put in place, as in just about every school district that I'm aware of, it means a significant change in how we are managing COVID information. We have a very interactive COVID dashboard, and that COVID dashboard is updated once per week. I give the board updates of the information that I receive daily, but that information, again, is based on lab tests, PCR tests that are given by medical professionals. The last piece that I'll share, in speaking of outbreaks and letters for outbreaks and those type of things, that information goes to those who are impacted by it. I wouldn't deem that as information. All the dozens and dozens of automatic letters that we're generating based on information that we receive is from the school, the administration of the school, the healthcare professionals, and the families who are impacted. So I wouldn't deem a board of directors or board of education to be those who would receive, just stacks and stacks of letters around the impact of COVID.
Any other comments on this one? Just want to make sure before I come back to you. All right. Okay, board member Whitletter.
What should the communication process look like from you communicating to the Board of Ed? Because I guess that's just a point of clarification for me that would be helpful. I know when there was the outbreak at Columbia High School, we received, during Newsies, we got an email, and in this particular case, and I think one of the members who spoke, I think her name was Kathleen, but mentioned that there was 100 students who were absent, so it's very disruptive. That information is new to me, but at what point should the Board of Ed be notified of a significant outbreak that has impacted a large number of children?
Yeah, and so I would just be careful on people sharing what they've heard, right, or what they have noticed. 100 students being out of a school is a statement that's made somebody on public speaks, right? They didn't say what school it was, they didn't say what day it was, they didn't say what grades were impacted. There's so many things that are a part of this communication that I have to be very careful with, because people hear what I say and they believe it's what the district is saying. From my perspective, sharing daily what the COVID impact numbers are, sharing weekly the summary of COVID impacts on each school, to me, that is beyond what I would think should be the expectation of, for you as board members. You're not paid employees of the school district. You have lives and jobs and everything else. I'm just trying to give you enough information based on our previous communication. So, for example, March 2020, someone just mentioned that date. When that date first happened, a few days later, maybe a few weeks later, we had our first COVID case, and it went to the local newspaper, and board members were upset that they didn't know about it. That's how I started doing the daily updates. We talked about interactive dashboards, and it took a while for us to create one. We have a brilliant IT lead who took the time and the know-how to make that happen. Not everybody has that. I think that there's a hunger to support families who feel impacted by COVID, but I think that there's a limit to what we can do and still be a school district. And I think one example would be the family who says, you're not helping us, you're not telling us what we can do. The first thing that we said when we went mask optional is that you can wear your mask, right? Like, you can protect yourself first. We've added ventilation filters to every single space. We've added odorox to every large space. But eventually, we're just following the guidance from our state, DOH, our local departments of health, and the governor.
Dr. Taylor, a question, I guess, is do we know how many, do we have counts, or how readily available is it to counts of how many people are taking advantage of the MediMobile testing recently? And then that's a question, and the comment is, I think I'm fairly certain that there was a district communication pre-spring break that outlined some procedures that families should do upon their return, which included voluntary masking and taking some other precautions, staying home when sick, getting tested, because we know a lot of folks traveled during spring break, much more so than, anecdotally, much more so than 2021. And so that, I recall reading something from the district about things that, as parents, we should do for our students, our children, when returning to school after spring break.
Sure, and you are correct. We have maintained our relationship with the MediMobile testing. They rebranded it to a different name. We're going to change their design a little bit, but it's still happening Wednesdays and Saturdays, I believe. And I can tell you from leaving here on Wednesday evenings that there are far less people taking advantage of that because of their own choice. But the recommendations that we made for spring break were, if you were traveling, to strongly consider masking your child when they return, and also taking advantage of the testing that we have procured here on site for families to take advantage of. Again, we know that we're never going to COVID-proof our schools, right? It's hopefully endemic, but we still have many pieces in place to assist in slowing the spread, and a lot of it has to do with each student's and family's personal choice to take advantage of the opportunities to mitigate.
Board Member Whitlander.
I was just going to say thank you, and it would be very helpful, and it's just my opinion, so I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in, but because the daily COVID updates are very helpful, but as far as numbers, there's not necessarily context, so not that we need, a summation of what's going on every day, but when there's an outbreak, if we could just be told sort of in that day's COVID update, you don't have to get into grave detail, but just so that we're aware that something like that is occurring in one of our schools would be helpful, I think.
So one thing that I was considering, and we were having some strategic conversations because I just try to be really consistent, right? And having the letters that say that there's an outbreak in this school that go to parents, having access to all those things. I know that I already give you Friday packets that have sometimes 100 pages, and so I'm just very selective over things that you're going to be voting on, things that are incidents that occur, and so I'm just very hesitant to add more. We could add more if that was the board's pleasure. We have access to it. I could give you every outbreak that we've had and put it in your upcoming Friday packet. I just want to make sure that I'm not overwhelming you with information that you're not going to have to take action on.
Board Member Malaspina.
I mean, I get phone calls and emails from parents asking about these things, so having something like that would be beneficial, even if it's just a chart that shows that, we're now at an outbreak or we're at these type of things. I'm in agreement with Caitlin that I would like to see that. And I do feel that is important.
So just to share again, one of the recent updates that you received was the update of when one of our schools went to mandatory masking. And again, I really do try and manage the information that you're receiving. I know that you don't have the ability I don't want you to be checking emails as often as I am. I'm mindful of this. So, but if that's the pleasure of the board to not wait till Friday to receive information like that, we can strategize ways to get around that. I want to make sure that that's the will of the board.
I guess two things I would say. One is I think when we get to outbreak level, there's probably this information that, even just in the email with the daily update is probably beneficial. But I also recognize that from the call Friday, that takes time, right? We're not the ones who are determining it's an outbreak. It's when we get lab confirmed positives from the Department of Health, if I'm not mistaken. Now, there are things, again, they said there are things that the district can do in advance of that, but in terms of that definition, my understanding is that it does take time, that 3 home tests in a classroom does not meet the definition of an outbreak. And I just want everyone to be very consistent of that, because, we do hear, as parents with kids in schools, we do hear and we see things, but the definition is lab confirmed cases, not home cases. And I guess I will also just, reiterate to all of us here as board members that, when parents do come to us, our direction should be to redirect them to the chain of command. We cannot solve their problems, particularly as it relates to COVID. In terms of the operation of schools, there is a chain of command, and all of our parents should be following that. So thank you. Seeing no other comments on this, I'm going to move on to my second item of new business this evening. I'll just do a brief overview, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Burnside. Mr. Burnside, on behalf of the business office and as board secretary, has asked the board to consider moving our standing monthly meeting to the last Thursday of the month. When that would happen, obviously, we would not do that this month or even next month. There would be a transition period, but he's asked us to consider that, and I'll turn it over to him to give us the rationale why.
Yes. So we have two main reasons, and the first one is for our vendors. I'm sorry. We have two main reasons for this recommendation. The first is from our vendors. As it stands, when we kind of have that middle of the month board meeting, that really doesn't give our vendors a lot of time to get their invoices.
You lost you guys, or am I the only one who lost them?
I lost them too.
Okay, I'm just checking to see if it's just me.
I see you all moving, but not the district.
Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't the only one.
Well, it allows us to gather more data and get more items on our agenda that we would like to discuss later on in the month. Because if it's in the middle of the month, there's a good 2 weeks to the end of the month where we just don't get an opportunity to inform the board of everything. And that's really the rationale behind it. I think it's pretty important, especially with the prompt payment laws that we have in New Jersey, that we have to pay our vendors within a specific time period.
Can you sort of go back?
One second, Board Member Melsman. Dr. Taylor wants to comment before we go
No,
to
we
the board for
missed-
questions.
We
Sure,
missed all of it.
I'm sorry, you didn't hear anything he said?
Barely, nope. We got like. minute.
Is that consistent?
You all froze for us, yeah.
Oh, okay. Eric, can you do the Cliff's notes of that? They didn't hear you. We could hear you, yeah. The folks on the screen could not. Could you give us the Cliff notes?
Yes. The first item for the recommendation is to give our vendors more time to get their invoices into the business office so that we can pay more bills by the end of the month. And the second reason was so that we could have more items on the agenda and schedule our committee meetings later on in the month.
And one thing that Eric mentioned, sorry, Mr. Burnside mentioned, was that there's been a noticeable increase because of payment to construction vendors. So I just wanted to add that in as to why, when he said vendors, one of the things he did mention specifically were the construction vendors. Dr. Taylor?
Yeah, I would just emphasize that during one of our board meetings this year, we did make that shift just to kind of test it out, and it did work well, especially on the committee side. For all of us on committees, we know that you're running up against it, and the policy committee's waiting for others and vice versa. And we've also checked to make sure that there were no township conflicts, because we know some folks like to come to all the meetings, our meeting and the other township meetings, and maybe even ones they were not aware of. But we did check that, and that is a day that doesn't seem to have any conflict for the board's consideration.
Thank you. And just so you know, I think we're at a conflict this evening, but we know this meeting has to happen because of our reappointments and the legal ramifications and calendars. So any questions on that? Okay, so I think next steps will be we will work with the administration to put together a calendar for a future board meeting. Will take place, I guess we'll figure it out. Like again, it surely won't be Monday. And it won't be June either. The earliest this would take place is July, ideally, before September and the start of school, because we know a lot of organizations that are affiliated with the schools are interested in the schools, tying their events around the idea that the board meets on the third Monday. So we want to give them plenty of notice that might be changing so that they can calendar their events accordingly. Any other new business this evening? Board Member Whitlander.
I have two items. The first is in regards to, and again, this is for deliberation discussion at the board table, having access to the buildings for a facilities tour. It was something that, for me, new board member, I've only physically been in Columbia High School and actually the backside of Jefferson. I really have never seen the insides of the buildings. I happen to be on the facilities committee, and it's our fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we're making informed decisions. And things like not realizing Seth Boyden's gym is in the basement, and why that's relevant is because they just had flooding. But these are all things because we've never been in the buildings, we're not aware of. So I just wanted to talk to everyone and see if it's something that others are interested in. And I also want to see if we can make this part of the onboarding process for every new board member when they're elected to be able to have this opportunity.
Thank you. I know there are some other verifications. I know this has been discussed, and I know it's on our agenda for, I believe it's this week's Finance Facilities Committee meeting. I'll let Dr. Taylor, and then I believe it's on the agenda for this week. Yep.
But can we discuss it here?
Yeah, absolutely. We can have that discussion. And then I guess we can then take it off with that committee's discussion to shorten the meeting. So yeah, I would, let me ask Dr. Taylor to chime in, and then I'll open up to the rest of the board.
Sure. I think I've seen different versions of this in my career. One that I've seen is kind of a first day of school, I guess you would call it like a train of cars, right? We're all going to visit and say hi to all the kids on the first days of school. I've also seen where a particular committee that has those responsibilities goes to specific sites that have planned projects there. I think that the challenges that I've seen with that sometimes is very easy for when a board member sees a site to make mental notes and judgments about the folks who work in those buildings. And it's also can be a challenge of who's leading the board members through, because there are going to be questions that come up that only a facilities person would be able to answer. And the guarded nature that some may have, feeling like this is a evaluative visit, right? What does that mean? So I would recommend that the board seek out a little more direction from the solicitor or school board association around that, because it could be a slippery slope towards an evaluative scope occurring.
Thank you. I think one thing that just based on what I'm hearing is that we obviously would not want to do this during the school day, I think, because we don't want to interrupt the delivery of instruction for our students. So I think that's to me, that would be, one of the non-negotiable aspects of this is that would have to be, in the weekend or possibly even in summer when it could be done during the day when people are around, but not, obviously not students. I know there's, we do some summer programming, but we can work our way around that in an easier manner than trying to walk through, a school that has either, 400 to 500, or if it's Columbia, 2,000 school students, 2,000 students, plus all the staff in the day. So I would suggest, we can have more conversation, but I think one thing to think about is that I think this probably should be just more about the interest, and then the sort of the ramifications can be discussed, whether it's and we can put it in the committee meeting for further discussion about the machinations of how to get it accomplished, calendaring it, things like that. I know there's, notice and requirements about having 9 of us or 5 of us in any particular space at a given time. So those are things that we can work through in committee. I just wanted to see if there's conversation about the idea of having this as an option for us in the near future, so I got 3 hands on the screen, so I'll come to them first, and then I'll come to people at the table. Board Member Malaspina, and then Bergen and Wright.
I have interest in this.
Thank you.
And have asked for it in the past and was denied.
Well, I think that was slightly different, but thank you. Board Member Bergen.
I also support this request and think we can figure out a way to make it happen within the bounds of our role here. And I wanted to add that a specific request for the board to have a tour of Columbia High School because we're going to be voting on the long-range facilities plan there. And I think it's important that we all get to see the pool space when we're making decisions about what to do with it.
Thank you. Board Member Wright.
I concur, and with my 9 years on the board, I've visited many facilities with our business administrator and head custodians when we've had issues with fire alarms or other kinds of things, of course, before the bonding. And so it's really necessary for board members to know our buildings. It's necessary, and we can do that after school without the interruption of the school day. I've even been invited into buildings to assist in certain areas in the academic area. So it's really no problem. It's something that we ought to do, especially with the bonding.
Thank you. Board Member Winkfield.
I'm definitely in support of this, but just want to reiterate, I think that it should really be goal-focused, so around something that the board's being asked to consider or take action on. And just want to reiterate that would need to be done, not necessarily to our convenience, but to ensure that we don't overstep and, even accidentally sort of veer into that territory of observing anything with respect to personnel or instruction.
Board Member, wait, just want to make sure. Sanders? Okay. Board Member Whitletter.
One thing I just wanted to add is that I don't want to overstep. This was actually something I didn't even know was a best practice. When I first started and I had a conversation with the NJSBA, I'm like, how do I get acclimated with learning about the schools? And obviously we can't just schedule meetings with principals. We can't just meet with teachers. But they said this is something that's done in district, that's a best practice. And I just happened to sit on FFT and again, it's about being informed about the buildings, especially when we're supposed to be making informed decisions as it relates to our facilities. So that's, really the intent here. Just wanted to make sure I clarified that.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any other comments. I believe Board Member Whitletter had another piece.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about, I know it's already happening, but I wanted to see if we could formalize the committee chair meetings. I know in other districts it's called the governance committee, and I think that this particular committee arguably is one of the most important committees from an organizational standpoint, because as the committee chairs convene, this is where, we're making sure that we're discussing district goals from different vantage points, things that board members want to bring up, topics of conversation. I know we kind of find a home and a starting point in committee for them. And I just think it's really important that we can all weigh in. I know Susan's been leading and she's been really great, and I've been able to email her directly and ask for things to be on the agenda, but if we could have a more formalized committee and potentially keep minutes and things like that, I just wanted to bring that up for discussion.
Thank you for that. So I think the idea, one of the things I've talked about when it comes to committees is not trying to overwhelm everybody with work, and that's why, we have our 4 standing committees. And we do have, right now, 3 ad hoc committees, and that is subject, those are in fluctuation. As the need arises, we can add one and remove another. I think personally that sort of structure of 4 and 3 is a good number. The idea of creating a governance committee that's just of the committee chairs, obviously would be the standing committee chairs, just to be clear, and then giving them another committee. I don't know if a standing committee would be appropriate because they meet every month. You're tacking on another meeting. We could consider the idea that, and maybe it's a bylaw, Board Member Bergen, that we could change a bylaw that just says, not by default per se, but the 4, standing committee chairs will be part of the governance committee, but my understanding is that governance is more of a bylaw type and policy type role. So I'm just a little, I'm okay with the idea of, standardizing committee chair meetings, but I don't know if the governance committee might be the most appropriate term for it, just because I think of that more so as a policy piece, and like in terms of our bylaws and best practices and things like that. And our committee chairs meeting, for those who are unfamiliar, is something that I've asked, in the past 2 years of my presidency, that committee chairs get together regularly to discuss things that are happening. Obviously, not everyone's on every committee, but everyone's on at least one or two, and it gives an opportunity to sit down and understand how those committees are working toward their goals for the district individually, and then, sharing that information back and forth. Because obviously there are topics that hit more than one, and just want to make sure that the conversations are happening, so there isn't a long delay between a topic hitting one committee and then hitting another committee before it comes to the full board for discussion. So those are just my initial thoughts. I think it's okay to have something in process, and we can figure out what's the best way to get that done. And obviously, minutes is probably the most relevant or prevalent way to get that done. Is whether it's standardized or not. If there are meetings, if the minutes are disseminated after the meeting, that's probably the most important thing for all of us in terms of understanding how committees are interacting with each other. Board Member Bergen, and then Malaspina, and then I'll come back to those in the room.
Oh, thanks. I guess I just wanted to say, I think that, one reason we haven't done minutes is we don't have a staff person assigned to this committee of committee chairs that meets every once in a while. So I don't know. I mean, I think it makes sense for us to keep meeting, but I don't know if it rises to the level of making it a formal committee with a staff person assigned to it. And I think I would want to find out more about what governance committees actually do in other districts and learn more about that, because I've heard of them, but I don't know if the committee chair meeting, if the committee chairs are the governance committee, or if governance committee is something that other districts that don't have executive committees have instead of executive committees. But we can look into that and research it more.
Yeah, I don't think Board Member Whitlander is wedded to the name, it's more that's the idea. So we can, I just want to point that out, because you can't see area, but I can. All right, Board Member Malaspina.
I think this all goes back to the idea of communication between committees and communication via minutes and stuff like that. We're still siloing each other, and we don't know. I had no idea you had a meeting the other day with the health officers, and some people do a good job explaining when meetings are happening. Some people don't. Some of our ad hoc committees have minutes, some don't. Some of our standing committees have meeting minutes that we then find out aren't fully detailed or correct. So it goes back to the discussion we had last month, which we really need to find a better way of communicating and getting our questions asked and answered correctly, because we are failing right now. There is still these silos, and we need to stop.
Let me send her, I'll try to send her a quick email.
What?
We lost that last minute, sorry.
Okay, so
Your turn. Can you give us the Cliff Notes?
Okay, Cliff Notes, we need to do a better job. We are siloing each other, and we have to stop, because it's a continuation of last month, where we're still at the point where we don't know what's going on, all of us, especially people who don't have a committee chair or are not a committee chair. And the meeting minutes aren't even good enough anymore right now to be able to look at.
I disagree. Thank you. Board Member Valamani.
Can we have a discussion about this?
At least,
I just turned the floor over to Board Member Valamani. Thank you.
so one thing I would caution against having way too many official, committees, because at some point, there's a diminishing return to having multiple committees. And based on at least of the committee of chairs that we have, it's an informal committee where we're talking about how to manage meetings better, as opposed to talking about the meetings themselves. There's a difference between that. So this is more of a best practices exchange between the committee chairs, saying, oh, this is what we do, this is what we do, this is what we do, does it make sense? We don't bring up any subject saying, in FFT, we're talking about the long-range facilities plan. That's not what we're talking about. So So those minutes really have no meaning outside of the best practices. If you wanted to have a governance thing that is, overarching and looks at bylaws, that's a different problem. But I can tell you that the current chair's meeting is not one of them. And if there's a burden of having minutes and all that stuff, then it kind of defeats the purpose of having an informal quick meeting.
Just want to make sure, because board member Whitletter.
Okay, so that's very helpful because I was under the assumption, I thought that you guys discussed topics where the topic falls across multiple committees. So let's say, it's transportation. It's like, okay, we're going to start that conversation in FFT, but transportation would also impact CNI, whatever the other committee was, policy. And so the home goes to FFT and that's where it begins. But obviously it's like you guys are at a higher level coming from different angles on how we're addressing opportunities and challenges. This was my assumption, which I think is actually a really great idea. And this way too, when we talk about district goals, we can make sure that we're addressing them across all of our committees as well. So that's very helpful because I was under that assumption.
So, yeah, let me add a little bit to that. So I think, there's been two this year. The first one was just like sort of how to be a committee chair. Second one was just like how to get, what best practices to running your meetings. The next one should start focusing because it'll be right around goal setting season. So it should be about that conversation about these items that we think are important. How do we, fit them within our committees in a way that we're not stepping over each other, but also, make sure that the conversations are happening, things that do touch multiple are discussed in multiple. So it will be with that, but I think, the first two were more just about how to be an effective committee chair and what that entails. And part of that is ensuring that conversations aren't backed up in your committee versus someone else's committee. So I just want to add that. The other thing I just want to reiterate, again, this word silos keeps coming up with this negative connotation. We have committees, we don't have silos. The committees do talk. I've taken some of the feedback, which is why calendars have been going out about the events when people are meeting. If things happen quickly, I don't get the opportunity to send it out, but I sent out the notes from meetings when they happen. I do ensure that I get out as much information as I can, again, without overwhelming folks with emails. I sent quite a few over this weekend. I didn't want to send any on Sunday so that all of you could enjoy your Mother's Day. So you got a bevy from me on Saturday night. That's just how it works. But I just want to push back again, and I will continue to push back on this idea of silos when we do have committees, and we are supposed to have committees as a board that's structured that way. Thank you. Board Member Valimani.
And I do want to push back against this general notion that there isn't enough information floating around amongst the board. I mean, the information it's more than just a distribution list. It's an interactive thing. So when there's a list that goes out, I mean, if there are minutes that go out and there's something that is not clear, it is up to the other board members to step up and say, I don't understand. This is not a one-way information flow saying that, oh, these are the minutes, read them up, done, we're done. So I actually think there's enough information. Yes, I mean, do I want to know about if I wanted to know about every small little thing that happened? I don't know if there is there, but I would reach out to the people, the appropriate people, and ask them. Like, for example, I just did that for CNI. I said, I don't get to see this information. They're like, oh, it's all on the common, the shared drive. And it becomes easy from there on. So I just want to push back against this notion that there isn't enough information.
Thank you. I see that our solicitor has her hand raised, so I'm going to come to her, Ms. Butler. You're muted, Ms. Butler.
Thank you very much. Again, I just want to remind the board members about the issues related to Open Public Meetings Act and making sure that any communications that take place among board members are not violative of the act.
Thank you. Board Member Malaspina.
So are we moving on to new topic, or are we staying on this topic? I'm trying to understand.
I called on you someone to see if you had a question on this, but if you don't, then I'll see if there's any other new business this evening.
I would like to bring up new business, so.
Board Member Malaspina.
Okay, So I would like to, this is our reorg meeting. And I think we need to have a serious discussion about the role of the executive committee and if we really need one. I find it to be something that we should, we're one of the only in the state to have an exec committee. And it has led to more issues than I would say than needs to be. I understand the need for a president, but I do not think that we need to have 2 vice presidents, and that I think we should have a discussion amongst ourselves as to really why do we have an exec committee and what is the purpose of the exec committee, because there's nothing written right now in our bylaws that say what you guys really do. And I think we need to really seriously talk about if we need one.
Thank you for that. I do believe that all the committees are working on mission statements for, I believe it's for this month's meeting. So the executive committee will have one for then. In short, what we do is, obviously the job of the president can be very time consuming at times. And so, there are things, and I've said this to the 2 vice presidents who are more than welcome to chime in, as well as any former vice presidents. I know there are 2 here as well. One of the goals that I have set for the executive committee, I think, is, maybe not goals, one of the ways I employ it is to help me do things that I may not necessarily have time to do. So for instance, whether it's communications, contacting folks, standing in my place at events. For instance, last year I wasn't able to attend some of the groundbreakings, so I had the 2 vice presidents give speeches on my behalf as I was unable to attend. There are other events where, my attendance may be required if I'm unable to attend. I've asked vice presidents to step in for me. I do think that it's important that, and for me, it's also a bit of a sounding board. When I have decisions that I think are in the best interest of the board, I'll ask, for, second opinions from the 2 vice presidents, and sometimes they agree and sometimes they don't. And when they both disagree with me, I've changed my opinion or changed my thought process based on information that they've shared with me. So I do appreciate the comment. You're right, we're one of the few in the state. I can say that I was contacted at the end of last year by someone who was contemplating employing one because they were now a new member of a board of 9 who wanted to have a second vice president to just offer more leadership opportunities within that board, and that was a board in South Jersey. My understanding of the genesis of it was to give opportunities for leadership within the board, and that, the sheer amount of work that we have as a larger district was deemed to be too much for 2, and they wanted 3 to ensure that there were more voices had an opportunity to be heard. That's my understanding. I've had conversations in the past with prior presidents about how they employed the executive committee, and I've also had conversations with prior vice presidents about their views of being on the executive committee. So I do think that if it's something we want to have a further discussion on, I think there's really 2 things here. Are we talking about executive committee, or are we just talking about the executive, board, so to speak, and the fact that, the executive board consists of the president and 2 vice presidents, or is it the fact that the committee has other things? For instance, from a policy perspective, the executive committee is responsible for the bylaws. We review those. Other policies are reviewed by other committees, whether it's finance, personnel, whatever have you. Bylaws, since they don't really fit anywhere, they fit more into that governance role that we talked about earlier. Those fall in the executive committee. We know we do have meetings about those on times, or sometimes it's just an email exchange between the 3 of us about a policy. Depending on the depth and length of it, it can be reviewed via email over the course of a day or so, since we're all busy. So those are just some of my initial thoughts. If the idea of having one, if we're talking about executive board or we're talking about executive committee, I just want to be clarified. You said executive committee, board member Mouse-Mander. So before I open up for further comments, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to specify if you meant board, committee, or both.
I think I meant both, because the only thing that you're telling me right now is that, bylaws are, you guys write the bylaws. Well, we have a policy committee. I bet you we could take that over.
Well, they didn't get done. That's why they
Well,
were. And I mean, they didn't
now
get done because they didn't have a policy committee. So
not interrupt me. I wasn't
I
done.
apologize. I apologize.
What I was saying is that we now have a policy committee, and we could probably take over that part. So I don't see the need for a whole executive committee at all. I think we could do with a president and a vice president, and that's it. And I'd like us to have a discussion as a board of the whole about that.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate that the policy committee is not supposed to own any policies, which is why the bylaws go to the executive committee. It could have gone anywhere. They chose the executive committee because that really talks about the governance and operation, how the board functions. So if any of the current vice presidents want to comment before I go to others, let me know. Otherwise, I can go to, I see board member Wright has her hand up. Board member Wright, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know if one of the executive board members wanted to speak.
The floor is
first.
yours.
Okay. I agree with Ms. Malaspina. I don't think, that that it's really necessary. I also think that it will probably help to improve on communication and the things that we do. I think it's something that we should absolutely discuss, especially since we're one of the few in the state that have an executive committee. Thanks.
Thank you. Board member Wakefield.
While I haven't served on the executive committee in my year and a half on the board, I feel really strongly that it's a function that we need to continue. I believe really strongly in distributive leadership, and I think that we have a model on this board that functions really well of distributive leadership. So I see the executive committee as an extension of the way that we use committee chairs and committees to be able to really drive the work of the district. I actually feel really good both last year and this year of the composition of our executive committee, because I think it reflects a real diversity of perspective, a diversity of experience in the district. And for me, as I think about the board president and the enormous role that he or she or they have to fill, personally, I would really like that person to have some diverse thought around them, to be able to question, to be able to challenge or support, so that whatever decisions are needing to be made from that role are really informed in a way that is feasible. It is not feasible for the board president to call all 8 of us every time he or she needs to be able to vet or think through a decision, in particular, one that is time-bound. So for me, I think having both vice presidents really serves an important and crucial role in ensuring that in a
We lost you guys again. I don't know if you can hear us. If you can, we lost you.
I'm afraid that the board president would sort of be doomed either way. And so for me, having, in this case, board member Whitletter and board member Bergen, in really crucial support roles with board president Joshua, for me, gives me a lot of comfort that there's a lot of diversity of thought before a decision is made.
Thank you. Board member Bergen.
Thank you. First, those of us who are hybrid lost part of what board member Wingfield said there. You guys froze again, but I think we got the gist of it. I wanted to say that, the executive committee does all the things that the board president mentioned, and I think probably the most important or the most time consuming or whatever, the biggest part of the role are sharing the work and being a sounding board for the board president. There does need to be one vice president so that there's someone who can sign documents and, chair meetings in the event that the president isn't available. And I do think that it is important to have two people to be a sounding board. And I think that the intention of this suggestion is to increase the number of people that the board president consults with every decision, but I think that it might have the opposite effect of, not doing that. So just given time constraints and given everything. So I don't know that it would really achieve the effect that is, being hoped for, but I would be open to learning more about other governance structures. And also I think it would be important to talk to past board presidents and executive committee members about their experience on the executive committee.
Great. Thank you. Board Member Valamani, and then Whitletter? Okay, thanks.
So I actually support the exec committee existing and performing all the roles because, even looking at structures outside of education, I mean, it is not uncommon to have co-CEOs. It is not uncommon to have co-heads of extremely important departments. And the way I see this is that the board is an extremely important body, and having one person, yes, there is a lot of power given to the board president, but it is helpful for the board president to have a couple of people around who can share the burden, be the sounding board, as I'm assuming that's what's happening, and actually reach out to other board members on behalf of the president. So that way it's distribution, it's time distribution. So, I mean, to me, it's a very pragmatic way of handling complicated scenarios.
Thank you. Board Member Whitletter.
So I think there's a lot to unpack here, but first and foremost, with my short experience on the board, and obviously over the last 4 months, I've been part of the executive committee. There are ways that the executive committee has been effective, but there's also areas for improvement. And some of the things that I notice is that at times the executive committee could be a bottleneck for information flow. And when I started, I actually had asked them, what does the second vice president do? And I didn't really get a clear definition of what that is. When we went and signed our code of conduct and did that on day one when we started, in the code of conduct, people are supposed to funnel questions to the district through the executive committee. And what I soon learned is that some people choose to do that and others don't. So there isn't a process that the whole board is following. And I tried to create a process to organize content that was coming in, and I just found that sometimes things that were sent through to the executive committee sort of died at the executive committee, which is why, I think it's so important to use new business to actually have conversations amongst the full board to discuss really important things. But, obviously it's not news to anyone that there's troubling communication on this board. I think the notion that there's a hierarchy and a group of people who have more power, we are a board of equals. I think organizations that are also very successful can be flat organizations where you don't have this significant hierarchy. We're a group of 9 people because the reality is the only person who wields more power than any of us is the board president. I mean, you have more responsibilities than we do. And so, in my it's a short experience, but I don't see the value in the executive committee. I don't see it improving outcomes. I don't see it bringing people together. I don't see the information flow from exec to other board members. And, again, I don't know what our committee charge is at the moment, but we're all sounding boards for one another. And you shouldn't only be picking up the phone to call me and Susan to get your opinions. I know that you talk to others, but the point is we all need to be talking more to one another, and there shouldn't be a group of people who are perceived to have more power on this board than anybody else.
Thank you. Board Member Saunders, and then Board Member Valamani, and then Board Member Saunders, and then Board Member Wright, and then Board Member Valamani.
As someone who served on, I can hear me, who served on the executive board for 2 years. I mean, and served as that second vice president. the workload is a lot. It's a lot for the board president. And that workload gets shared when you have 1 to 2 people on the executive board. My fear is that if we do away with that, what happens to that workload? What happens to the board president being a
We lost you again. I don't know who can hear us, but we lost you again.
to like start over with our process. Let's figure out how to make it better, how to make it work. I think, but yeah, all right.
You froze again for us, so we
Yeah.
missed part of what Aaron said there.
Yeah.
Can you say the last piece again, Board Member Siders?
Just that we're in the middle of the school year, and I don't think now is the time to tear down what we've been working with for the last 6 months or 5 months and start over with something new. We need to evaluate what we're doing and find out how to make it better, not necessarily start over from scratch.
Thank you. Board Member Wright?
Oh, thank you. I missed some of what Board Member Winkletter said, but Winkfield said, but a communication plan must be an area of priority for the board to work effectively and efficiently. And Board Member Winkletter stated, I think we lost her at some point, but it seems to me that she believes that the current model is helping with good decision-making. And I was wondering if she could give us some examples of that.
Yeah, I can say one thing that I've noticed this year in particular is the organization of questions that I assume are coming into executive committee and that get funneled to me as the personnel chair have really helped me to work with my SLT liaison, Ms. Robinson, to begin to prioritize our agenda setting together based on many of the questions that are coming up from board members. So that's a change that has come from the executive committee this year in particular to me that has strengthened our meetings, that ensures that voices and perspectives of board members who aren't on that committee are able to be represented and show up in the conversations we have on personnel. And I can only assume that that's also happening in the other committees as well. So that's one example I think that has been a real tangible improvement, not just in communication broadly, but in putting a structure in place that has really strengthened not only communication, but the impact of our meetings as a result of that.
Thank you. Board Member Valamani and then Board Member Bergen.
So, I mean, this is something I'm having difficulty understanding is that if you're having communication problems and complaining about that with 3 people being on the exec committee, how can it possibly improve when there's only 1 person on it? And that is something I just don't get. And at least now there's an opportunity, maybe 2 out of the 3 want to talk about it, or maybe all 3 want to talk about it. But at least there's now opportunity for others to push the information out. And as Board Member Wingfield correctly pointed out, is that the questions are now getting funneled correctly. Like even with on the FFT committee, I maintain a large spreadsheet of all questions that come in, and a lot of them are getting funneled through the exec committee. So I mean, I'm having trouble understanding how this can be a bad thing. Yes, I mean, if they're not talking to you at all, that's different. But then that could happen to the board president too.
Board Member Bergen, Mouse Whitletter.
I think that you know, communication is a favorite topic of conversation at our board meetings, and we all have to have really realistic expectations for how our committees work and what information we all should have. I think the reason we have committees is to trust the committee to do the work of the committee, and I don't feel like I need to have all the information that someone on a committee has necessarily. And I also think that, you know, like we might get 20 questions from one person, and there has to be a way for the executive committee or the committee chair to screen those questions and to screen things that are outside of our role or that may not be related to the goals that we have, the district goals for this year, and to prioritize that way. And that it's not realistic to send a long list of questions to a committee and have them all answered at the next meeting. We don't each get to like hijack, you know, the agenda of a committee by sending an exhaustive list of detailed questions that aren't related to the priorities that that committee has at that moment in time. And I think that it's important that we all understand that questions need to be screened and that we, you know, we aren't all going to get answers immediately to all of our questions. And we may not get answers to all of our questions if they are questions that don't involve information that the board has access to.
Board Member Malasmina, then Whitletter, and then Siders.
I think it comes down to trust, and right now there isn't trust that things are getting done. I mean, I've been told to go to meeting minutes to look at for answers to my questions, and then come to find out that those meeting minutes are not complete and don't have everything in them. So, you know, we're not doing a very good job right now with our communications. We're not doing a very good job with our committee structure. You just admitted right now that you screen questions and you guys make the decisions as to what gets asked and what doesn't. We were all elected for this position. We all have the equal ability to do that. Zaire also just stated tonight that he talks to some people about things and makes decisions, and we're not all included in the decision-making process. That's concerning that this is what's occurring. I get the idea of we need to have somebody that is a president and then somebody's the vice president that takes over. But we right now have a hierarchy, and this hierarchy needs to change. We are all elected. We should all have equal information, and we should all be getting the same information, and that is not occurring right now.
So just a couple things. I think also, I wasn't sure, Board Member Wright, if you had asked about something that I thought the executive committee did that was effective. So I just wanted to give an example was during the mid-year evaluation process, just collecting and collating all the information from board members. You know, we worked together to do that, and I thought it was a very thorough process, and that was just one thing that I thought was positive. But going back to some things that you had said, Board Member Siders, in terms of who would handle the workload, and I think a lot of the workload, rather than go through, and not everything comes through the executive committee. So I just want everyone to be clear about that, because the process that we started at the beginning of the year, and I was told by the committee chairs, and I totally get it, that it was overwhelming the questions, and that it was then taking over the agenda and the direction of the meetings. So, you know, when I took the position on the executive committee, it was something I spoke in detail with Board President Joshua, as well as Board Member Bergen, was just like, I wanted to see a commitment to improving our communication across the board, to make sure that everybody felt informed and that there was free flow dialogue and information. And, you know, I think what we're seeing here is that there's different committees do things differently. There's communication that goes to some and not to all. I mean, Arun, you've created a wonderful process for collecting, you know, questions that come in through FFT, but that's something that you've spearheaded, right? Because we've been told in terms of our process to go directly to chairs when we have questions. So if the questions aren't coming to the executive committee, they're going directly to chairs, why can't we continue to offload this work onto the committee so that it's in its rightful spot to begin with? And just to go back to in terms of executive committees, so in Essex County and Morris County, There's only one district in Essex County who has an executive committee, and that's ours. And there's only one district in Morris County has an executive committee, and that's the Morris County Public School. So not to say that executive committees shouldn't exist, but we need a commitment to make it more effective, which I think is what you're saying, better strategies. I'd like to see more of that commitment because otherwise, to me, it has been a bottleneck, in my opinion, to information getting passed across all of us. That was it.
Board Member Saunders?
Just going back to what you're saying about the executive committee and tying it back to what Board President Joshua said earlier. So executive committee meaning it's an actual subcommittee of the board. Not every board in the state has an executive board. So they have a board president and at the very least one vice president. But you're saying that only our district has an executive committee, which is a subcommittee with 3 people. And that is something new. We didn't have that previously. But my understanding of why we have that now was to officially give that committee work. So when I was policy chair that first year, I went through the bylaws and got, worked to get them up to date. And I worked with the board president, the first vice president to get all of that up to date. And then it was disseminated to the board. So that was my understanding of why we have a board, an executive committee, to actually have a committee that has defined work. And do I have that correct, Board President?
Yes, that's my understanding as well. My 3 years on the board, that's been the case, that the committee is not just, the president, vice presidents, and they're just, figureheads, not figureheads, but like an executive board, right? And they're just, if I can't come, then Board Member Bergen runs the meeting. But Board Member Bergen and I both can't come, then Board Member Whitletter runs the meeting. It's actually, like I said, in the bylaws is a perfect example. Last year, some of the access and equity stuff that didn't fit neatly into one particular committee from a policy perspective went to the executive committee first for review, the revision, then to go back to the policy committee. Since we've said policy committee doesn't own policy, they are, in terms of getting policy to committees, SLT to review, et cetera, et cetera. So that was another initiative that sort of happened last year. We haven't had as many this year because we took care of most of them last year. So those conversations haven't had to happen. But if they do, then that would be another place where they would go. Another initiative that was raised to me by Dr. Taylor was the idea of regular reviews for registration hearings. A lot of times we do have ad hocs where we just say, hey, I need 2 or 3 people to attend a residency hearing. And this would be a short-term place to centralize it while we're working through those, because it becomes a time-sensitive matter when I've got to find 3 board members to do that, or we do these, whether it's residency, it's HIB, things like that, where we just need a subset of the board to be present for something, and we get like a week or a week and a half, 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks notice, depending on the timing. Some of these things have 10-day requirements, so we have to be nimble. And so in that case, 3 people gives you a sample of the board. It doesn't have to be 3. That's my goal, just so that by 3 you have some diversity of thought. Obviously, one person could go and do it, but then we're just going to pepper that one person with questions. 3 people, for instance, at a HIB hearing, and we hear 3 different, 3 perspectives. They're different, but if they all end up coming to the same conclusion, it gives the rest of us comfort that to trust our colleagues and heed their recommendations. So those are a couple of things. I don't think HIB necessarily, those aren't often enough, and because of the scheduling, it's not always appropriate. But like I said, the residency one was something that was raised to me with Dr. Taylor, and there will be further discussion about if the need still exists. It could be something that would fall under exec committee as well in the short term. Board member, I think Board Member Wright has spoken since I know I stepped away, but I guess that's an old hand. So we'll come to Board Member Wingfield.
It's a new hand.
Okay, so I'm gonna come to Board Member Wingfield and then come back to you because I know you've spoken since the last time. Really? Okay, I apologize for that, Board Member Wright. You go ahead.
Thank you. What I was wondering is the intersection between the board and the administration is what needs to be reassessed, and are there barriers to the work of the board? Because it seems there may be. The other thing is, and my last question is, where do we go from here, and how do we improve communication? So it's those things, and I'm done.
Thank you. I'll let Board Member Wingfield comment and then I'll comment.
I think using this space of news business to process and share ideas about improving communication is a great use of this space since we're so restricted in other ways of being able to communicate. But I just need to acknowledge that I feel like the use of trust on this board is often used, for me, at least from my perspective, as a dog whistle that is not used in a collaborative problem-solving way. And for me, if we want to improve communication and if we want to actually build trust, it's about consistency and it's about showing up to want to solve problems. And for me, I think that we really miss opportunities when we don't acknowledge the ways in which feedback has been given in the past and that policies, procedures, regulations have been adjusted to respond to that feedback. Just last month or the month before, there was feedback given about board members not knowing when meetings were occurring, so they couldn't get their questions in a timely manner and not get them addressed. It's totally valid feedback. That feedback was addressed by the time we met for our next committee meeting. And so by no means do I think that we are perfect. By no means do I think we don't have lots of room for improvement, but it's very hard to build trust when we don't offer grace and when we don't acknowledge progress. And so I just wanted to say that because we're in a space of wanting to sort of tinker with something and be able to improve it, but we are not going to ever build trust if we don't acknowledge the ways in which progress has been made.
Thank you. Board Member Bergen.
Thanks. I just wanted to build on what Board Member Wingfield said. You know, every month I and other committee chairs send an email to the entire board, letting them know what is on our agenda. And I feel like every month I'm honestly begging for feedback on policies, and very few people ever send me, feedback on policies. And then we, at each meeting, give a report out about what happened at our meetings. And then we ask if anyone has any questions. And there are usually no questions on what happened at the meetings. And so it's really hard to understand, this is the structure that we have all chosen, and we have to work within the Open Public Meetings law. And we have been advised that we can't have a spreadsheet that we put all the questions into and put all the answers into and that we all work in, because that's a violation of the Open Public Meetings law. So we do it this way with the monthly emails and the report outs. And so I just want to make sure that explain that to everyone who may be listening, that those are things that we do every month to let all of our colleagues know what's happening in our meetings and give them an opportunity to follow up and ask questions and provide feedback.
Thank you. Board Member Whitlander and then Saunders.
Just to answer your question, Board Member Wright, I mean, I think this is a great first step. Since I've been on the board for 4 months, this is the first time in new business, and it's probably because, it's not super late, but that we've been able to have a conversation back and forth and bring different viewpoints. We don't have to agree on everything, but I think that helps us to build mutual understanding and to consider different viewpoints so that we can get to a better place. And I just want everyone to know that I feel revitalized by this conversation. And I think there is a path forward, but it starts with just being able to share, our viewpoints and have others hear what we're saying. Whether you agree with it or not, you're listening, and we can have this open two-way dialogue.
Thank you. Board Member Saunders.
And in regards to communications, I think that we all need to do the best that we can to make sure we have the information that we need. And if somebody is stonewalling you, say something. I mean, I feel like I have the information I need. There's nothing I don't know. And that's not to say I know everything. What I need to know, I know. And I don't think that it's appropriate to be able to say as an excuse that you don't have information. It's there. And if you need to go talk to someone else and say, hey, I'm not getting the information I need, that needs to be said. But I don't want us to be in here and folks feel like there's information that they're not getting and just allow that to be. Do what you need to do to get what you need.
Thank you. I'll just say if there's, I guess the next steps would be, if we're talking about, if there is any desire to sort of augment and change our bylaws, then that would be, that'd go through the policy and bylaw process. So that would be one next step, or others could be, if there's a commitment to seeing this through, we could all, offer ideas and tips for what you think improving communication looks like, and then there can be future discussion. Any other new business this evening? Seeing none, I'll close new business and make the following motions. The Board of Education will meet in closed session Monday, May 16th at 5:30 PM here in the Superintendent's Office, 525 Academy Street, Maplewood, as well as using an online video conference platform to discuss personnel, legal matters, negotiations, and other matters to be determined at a later date. Immediately following closed session, the board will meet in public session Monday, May 16th, 2022 at 7:30 PM here at 525 Academy Street in Maplewood in the district meeting room, as well as using an online video conference platform. Action will be taken. The Board of Education will meet Monday in public session Monday, June 6th, 2022 at 7:30 PM in the district meeting room, 525 Academy Street, as well as using an online video conference platform to honor retirees and celebrate staff accomplishments. No action will be taken. May I have a second?
Excuse me, Board President Joshua, I believe,
Yes,
I'm sorry, I believe you said that on May 16th, the executive session would start at 5:30? On the agenda, it
6:30.
says
No,
6:30?
I heard that too, I thought you meant.
no, sorry. It's 6:30 at 525 Academy Street. So maybe that was sorry about that. No, 6:30 for Monday, May 16th. Okay. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Siders. All in favor? That appears to be unanimous. I'd like to adjourn this meeting Monday, May 9th at 9:47 PM. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Winkfield. All in favor? Thanks, everyone. Get home safely.